All right. Well, welcome everyone to this March edition, almost April, March edition of the Voices of Video. We're super excited to have you here. And I am really delighted to invite Eric Tang on. Eric is the founder of Livepeer. Eric, welcome to Voices of Video.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, I've been watching this series, so excited to be on here.
Yeah, it's great. I know, Eric, you and I have had a chance to do some other podcast interviews together, and always enjoy talking to you. So we have a really awesome conversation. We're going to talk today about real time interactive streaming and some new industry initiatives that Livepeer is involved in. But we probably should start for those who may not actually be familiar with what you've built. Why don't you give a quick overview of what the Livepeer platform is?
Yeah, thanks. So, for those who haven't heard of Livepeer, or actually for those who have heard of Livepeer, a lot of times people think of, I think today, people may think Livepeer is a kind of a decentralized video transcoding thing that uses the blockchain, right?
That's right.
While that's still true, Livepeer today um, um, is a video streaming platform for any developers, right? So we have there's a product called Livepeer Studio, which is the main kind of video streaming platform that we have. It's a API centric, open source, and really high quality and low cost solution for anybody building a video streaming application. So and it has the core kind of features there are video on demand and live streaming. I'm sure we'll later get
Mhm.
into kind of how those features are unique. And so I'd say it's an alternative to using some of the cloud services out there, whether it's Amazon Web Services like IVS or Cloudflare Streams or something like that.
Sure. Sure. Well, there's a very unique component, though, in that the platform leverages latent capacity in GPUs, correct? Encoding capacity.
That's right. That's right. So, even though from a developer's perspective, they use the API and it doesn't feel any different, right? Under the
Yes.
hood, it's completely different infrastructure, right? It's not
Mhm.
built on top of cloud services, and
Mhm.
instead it uses kind of a marketplace dynamic where think of anybody around the world can come and provide computation capacity to this network and then be
Mhm.
participating in this economy, right? So sometimes I tell people it's kind of the Airbnb for computers, but focused
That's
on
right.
just video streaming,
It's
right?
a good
So
analogy, actually.
yeah, like when we first started 8 years ago, right? This was mostly
Has it
hobbyists
been
who are.
8 years?
Oh man, yeah, tell me about it.
Yeah, yeah. You're
It's
like,
been a long
don't
time.
don't, don't remind me.
No, it's
Wow,
actually been really
amazing.
a really fun 8 years, but
Yeah,
but
yeah.
it has been has been a long ride, right? And
Incredible.
when
Yeah.
we first started, it was mostly hobbyists doing stuff, and just for
Mhm.
fun, downloading on their computers. Maybe they had a gaming GPU or something like that. But
Mhm.
it has over 8 years very much professionalized, right? And today,
Mhm.
most of that capacity is operating within a data center environment
Mm.
that's professional, right?
That's
And
right.
so what we've done is to take that capacity and build a API service that has high SLA, has all the things that you need as a customer to be able to like leverage this as a scalable video streaming business.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Well, thank you for that. So, tell me about the applications, that you see running on the platform.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. So, um, one of the key benefits of this platform is around, basically you get to have the same quality of service, same reliability experience as using a cloud vendor,
Mhm.
but with up to 80% in cost savings, right? And that's
Mm,
because people are putting spare capacity onto this network, and
that's
there's a
right.
marketplace dynamic, and they're competing with each other on the price and the quality of service, right? So as a result, we are currently seeing a lot of use cases that are sensitive to cost, right? And
Hmm.
they're coming onto this platform. So those are things like social media applications, right? And anytime you need to provide kind of a quote unquote free service for your
Yeah.
users, but
Yeah.
they're demanding a lot, and but you also have to like front the cost for streaming. That's a
That's
really
right.
good use case for us.
Yeah.
We're seeing sports streaming, right? Not the
Mm.
not the NBA quite yet, but definitely longer tail sports
Sure.
streaming, right?
Would
High
this be
school,
like
college sports,
secondary schools, college,
yeah,
maybe even just, I don't know, enthusiast, there's a lot of even just amateur sports that
yep.
people want to stream it, their friends want to watch whatever. So,
Totally. Yeah, I call
yeah.
it like challenger sports, right? Like
Yeah,
these are
yeah, there
the
you go.
yeah
That's
the
good. Yeah.
these are the a lot of times they are professional, right?
Yeah.
But they're just like getting started in these
Sure.
sports.
Sure, sure.
We're
Yeah.
also seeing people streaming actual professional sports in emerging markets, right? So for
Mm,
example, we
mm,
streamed the professional cricket tournaments in
mm,
Pakistan and India, right? We've streamed
mm.
actually we've streamed Premier League, believe it or not, in those
Wow.
emerging
Wow.
markets as well. Um,
Amazing.
and then there are other use cases that are might not be top of mind for most people, but are like clearly very prevalent. So things like church streaming,
Hmm.
very
Hmm.
big market, right? A lot of churches
I'm
need
sure.
to have really cost effective ways to get their message out there.
Yeah.
So that's those are some big markets that we're seeing for
Yeah.
life.
Amazing. Yeah, well, those that read the description know that today we're really going to focus on the real-time interactive streaming aspect. And so, why don't we start there? First of all, tell us what it is, and then I think it would be helpful to discuss where it's growing, and I think you have some case studies or maybe some examples that you have prepared, to give make it a little more real as to what we're talking about.
Yeah, so I'd say like real time and interactive streaming from a technology perspective is very much I think it's just about like what is the streaming protocol and how do we deliver that video with as low latency as possible, right? So we've
Yes.
picked WebRTC as that delivery protocol, and that's been working
Mm,
really great for us. We get sub 500 millisecond latency. We can
amazing.
stream up to 100,000 concurrent viewers per stream, right? And for most use cases that are that interactive,
Hmm.
that scale is plenty, right? So
Hmm.
what are those use cases? What are people doing? Well, there's been, I think, in the last, like especially COVID has really accelerated this, right? Like just anything online, I'd say, has become a lot more real time. Even for like Amazon delivery, we now are seeing like same day delivery, right?
Yeah,
And even
absolutely.
for online payment, where like I see like I want to use Venmo, that can be settled like the second that I paid someone, right?
That's right.
So like
Yeah,
all of
amazing.
that, and video streaming is not an exception to that.
Mhm.
So the things like live shopping being really popular in Asia, but also growing quite a bit in the US. And if you look
It
at
is. Yeah,
platforms like Whatnot, right, like they've built like really strong communities around these types of
yeah,
interactive streamings. But of course, game streaming has always been a really big one, where the creator is, it's directly talking to their viewers, but also very much engaging in that chat, in that conversation.
yes.
We see use cases like other types of entertainment, right? Like music being a really prevalent one.
Mhm,
Musicians are doing smaller concerts that are directly engaging with their fans instead of being on a big stage and
mm,
kind of just pushing that content one way. It's much
sure.
more engaging when they're playing like sometimes in their living room and taking
Yeah,
requests from the
yeah,
fans
that's
and
right.
and that's a totally different experience from the fan, right? So
Yeah, that's right.
um, so it's really not just about the content anymore. It's really about that full experience for someone who's really into the person, like that's
Mhm,
streaming. It's like creating that
mhm,
really close connection.
mm,
Another kind of a fun example that I say is we during the holidays, we did this reality TV show called Fish Tank Live, and this is
Okay.
if you know if you have seen like Big Brother, right, which is on like the network television, right, it's a reality TV show. A bunch of people live in a house, right, like the house itself is live streamed, but they also record it and edit it into episodic content. Well,
Yeah.
this one, but that one is still kind of like push, like you're just kind of watching, right? You can watch the live stream, but you're just like watching. this
Sure.
one this one kind of takes it one step further and make it, I would say, like really really internet native.
Mm.
And what it means is you can watch the live stream as the show is happening in real time. You can also interact with the contestants at any time in real time,
Oh,
right?
wow.
And so that's 15 cameras in the house streaming
And they
whatever
have
you see,
monitors
right?
or TVs around the house, and you
Yep.
could start talking to them like in the middle of some conversation like
Yeah,
that.
yeah. So it's
Oh,
really
wow.
crazy. So what you
I've not
see
seen it.
is,
That's
you
cool.
see you see like this grid view of like all these cameras, right? And
Yeah.
then you see people clicking into one of them, like watching someone having a conversation. They like walk into a different room. You see the viewership like immediately flop over to that room, right? In that way, and then people, you pay $5 for a robot to like read a message that you type, for example, right? And you see people doing that where
Wow.
a group of like a few people are having that conversation. A group of
Yeah.
people are talking about that conversation in the chat. Somebody's like, I'm going to interject and like change the conversation in some way, and I pay
Yeah,
five
yeah.
dollars and that immediately erupts into like a different conversation, and
Sure.
people are like
Sure, sure.
immediately reacting to that, right? So like a super sticky type of workflow and
Wow.
content type, and really really viral, right? Like
Yeah.
millions of
Yeah.
people around the world watching this, like kind of
Hmm.
crazy, like thousands of people just watching these contestants sleep,
Yeah.
like and just talking about it on the side, right? Yeah,
Wow. Amazing. Amazing. Yeah, I think you're bringing up a really fascinating point, and I love this. I've been involved in streaming delivery of video from well, not exactly the early days. I by no means would call myself an OG, but definitely from the early days of the premium delivery. So this is like 2007, 2008, when like the number one objection was, why would I want to stream and watch movies at like the quality of YouTube? Now the ironic thing is that YouTube back then was very low resolution, not YouTube today. It was, truly
yeah,
cat videos. It was, so the perception was that that's internet delivered video, right? But watching the progression, it's just super, super clear to me with the explosion of creators. That yes, there's a lot of these personalities, these celebrities, even someone like a Mr. Beast, um but it's like Mr. Beast is today's generation Steven Spielberg or something, in some ways. um uh but there's that interactive component that just makes sense to me, that they're increasingly, we want to get involved in the story. We just don't want to sit there and just have it come to us. And so I really love that, your platform, and as I'm seeing more platforms being built where interactivity is at the center of it, or the whole platform is designed with that in mind. One question, Eric. So, when you're talking interactive, you're talking bi-directional. And most of our streaming services and platforms are built on I have a file or I have a stream. I have, usually just one, one stream, one file, and I'm delivering it to hundreds of thousands, millions, maybe, over time, tens of millions. But in interactive, it's a very different paradigm, right? Because it could be a very small number of people on both ends. Um,
totally.
maybe you could explain, or talk about how you're seeing the platform getting re-architected. and the
Mm.
way that video services are even being built, or the way that people are thinking about building video services. Can you comment about that piece of it?
To- totally. There, so many different like nuances that are different,
Hmm.
like that are
Yeah.
specific to interactive streaming, right? So maybe I'll just start with like the fundamental question of like how do you build a business like that
Yeah.
actually makes
Yeah.
sense, right? Like
Yeah.
because the
Exactly.
business model is actually dramatically different, even though it
Hmm.
feels like, oh, it's still just streaming, right? Like what's the difference?
Yeah.
Well, like
Yeah.
the audience size is very different, like the amount of
Hmm.
connection that someone is having with the content is very different, the way that people are
Hmm.
engaging with the content is totally different. So it actually
Hmm.
just needs dramatically different business models in order for these platforms to be profitable and sustainable, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I'd say like for interactive streaming, the benefit is that you have like a super engaged and captive audience, right? Like
Hmm. Hmm.
people are there because they're your super fans. They know,
Super fans. Yeah.
they want to
Yeah.
be watching the thing while it's happening. They don't
Yeah.
want to go back and watch some recorded stuff
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
then consume in a passive way, right? So
Sure.
the engagement is the main experience. The
Mm.
content is kind of just like the filler. The content is like the thing that you can like go talk about while you're
Yeah.
there, but the
Yeah.
engagement is the main experience,
Yeah.
right?
That's right.
So then that brings up like you actually don't want to um monetize the attention, because like video has today has been largely primarily monetized via advertising, right? And when you do ads, you're monetizing
Yeah.
attention. But in
Yeah.
this interactive streaming world, that actually doesn't work because the audience
Mhm.
size is too small, right? You're not going to
Yeah.
be getting to a big enough size to like directly sell ads to people. And
Sure.
if you do like
Sure. Sure.
programmatic ads, like
Yeah.
you're not making any money, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of it is coming down to like creating very native monetization mechanisms that are very specific to the
Mm.
experience that you're creating, right? So
Mm.
and we've seen things work like virtual goods being a really important one. But
Yeah.
in the virtual goods world, like the design of the economy and the reason why people are purchasing those virtual goods and participating is crucial, right? It's
Mhm.
not just like a one size fits all kind of solution, right? For example,
Mhm.
a fish tank, they, and this is public because they did a crowdfunding campaign. Over 6 weeks, um, they made over $1.3 million with like
Wow.
like with a pretty niche community, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's like
Yeah.
60% profit margin. Like, how do they
Yeah.
do that? Well,
Yeah.
50% of that was access, right? So you need to pay twenty
Mhm.
dollars to watch the thing, and
Mhm.
and because that content is so viral and so sticky,
Mhm.
people are actually willing to pay $20 to like
Sure.
go for the ride for 6 weeks when they're like
Yeah.
at Christmas at home, whatever, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so that's half, and then the other half are just virtual goods, right? So
Mm.
and that's designed very tailored to that experience. So we
Mhm.
talked about um, the paying $5 to read a message to the contestants, right? Like
Mhm.
that works really well because you see, like people want to be involved in the content itself.
Yeah.
They want to be
Yeah.
engaging with
Yeah.
those with the contestants, and
Yeah.
you can do stuff like you can pay money to like deliver goods to the contestant. You can buy someone a pack of cigarettes and like give it to them in the house, right?
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
can. I think the craziest one that I've heard is somebody took pay $1,000 to take on someone's mattress for a night to like mess with
Okay.
somebody, right? So that those are
Uh,
the things, but that's the that economy and that way of virtual goods is so specific to not only the content
mhm.
type but only like the personalities that are on the show, right? And
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
so that's why it works so well. um, and
Yeah.
we also see like the more generic versions like e-commerce just works really well, right? We know
Mhm.
that already.
Mhm.
When
You mentioned
like
the live selling, the video selling, which has been huge in Asia for really years. And I've been puzzled why that hasn't taken off. I mean, I have my theories, and I'm sure there's some research around it. Why that hasn't really taken off in the US yet. And I
yeah
don't know if it's big in Europe, but um, But is
not
it
as deep in
coming?
Europe.
Is
Yeah.
it coming to the US, or what's the dynamic there?
Yeah, I think there's this narrative that, like, like 5 years ago, like everybody kind of saw what's happening in Asia, and then in the US, people, like a number of startups kind of started working on this,
Yeah.
right? And then,
Yeah,
VC
that's right.
community funded a bunch of these startups. Um,
Yeah.
I'd say, like, we now have a pretty clear winner, which is Whatnot. Like, they're growing really
Mm,
quickly, and they've really
mm,
captured the attention of this community, right? And if you
mm,
look at what they do, and that it actually maps to what's happening in Asia pretty well. Like in
mhm,
Asia, um, there's a whole cottage community, there's a whole
mhm,
cottage industry around this live selling, right?
mm.
It's not necessarily like, your celebrities or your influencers doing this on the side, making a little bit of money,
Yeah.
right? Like, these
Yeah,
are like
sure.
professional sellers that are really, really good at doing
Mm,
the thing, which is selling, right? Like selling on
mm.
camera, being able to move a
Yeah.
lot of goods, being able to talk about it
Yeah.
very effectively, build trust with the audience in a really, really condensed, content format. That's
Yeah.
all. That's like skill set that, they have agencies there to like train people to become these types of
Amazing.
like sellers, right?
Wow.
Like,
Wow.
and these are like big industries.
Yeah.
Like, I think the leading platform in China moved $500 billion of goods
Yeah.
last year. That's an insane amount of
That's insane.
goods.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's crazy.
Um,
Yeah.
but if you look at in Whatnot, like I think that what they did really well is they engaged with businesses, like business
Mm,
owners that actually want to move their goods, right? Like collectibles, like, Pokemon cards, or sneakers or
mhm,
things like that, right? Like,
mhm,
so these are people who are they're not influencers, they're not
mhm,
streamers,
mhm,
in other contexts, but they understand their product really well, and
mm,
they're good enough on camera to be able to like really communicate that well to their community, and they care
mhm.
about doing that virtually in a very specific way, right? So
Yeah.
by doing that, you kind of have the longevity of working with businesses that actually want to succeed and want to maintain that cadence over a long period of time, and you build a
Mm,
community over time, and you create kind of professionalism in that community, right? So I think
yeah.
that's a really
Yeah.
good lesson.
Yeah, interesting. Well, let's shift to talking about the technical dynamics. And I found something really interesting in your comment that you are leveraging WebRTC. Now, but that makes sense given that it seems like the platform is really being leveraged for lower latency applications where you didn't mention this, but I assume is gaming. Um, is that a use case, where somebody might be doing, like the virtual casinos or, even just gambling, that kind of thing? Is that an application that
Yeah,
Livepeer can service?
absolutely. Like iGaming is I think one of the mega trends that's happening in
Mm,
streaming today, right?
yeah,
Because of
that's
all
right.
the kind of the global deregulation in that
Sure,
industry.
sure, sure.
So a lot of iGaming platforms are popping up. Um,
Mm,
so that's definitely, we see that at Livepeer Studio as well.
yeah,
But even just gaming in general, if you look at what people are doing, like users want to have lower and lower latency in
yeah,
watching just people do regular game like Twitch streams, right? And
yeah,
I think if you
yeah.
look at the newer platforms that are trying to compete with Twitch, a lot of times they're doing that through WebRTC.
Yeah, yeah, and there's a real high focus on reducing latency, which improves user experience. I mean, there is a correlation there. Uh, so, talk about there's some myths, and I really do think of them this way around WebRTC, and there's probably even somebody listening probably more than one person is like, okay, that's fine. Yeah, social media, some influencer, but it's not for premium video. I think you've got a different perspective around that. And so maybe you can share with us what you have built and what you're seeing. And, is WebRTC for a premium experience or is it not there yet?
Yeah, I'd say it depends on like how you define premium. right? Like
Yes. Yes,
it kind of comes
that's a
back
great
to that.
place to start. Everybody
um,
thinks of
y-
that
y-
different. Yeah.
yeah. So I'd say it really comes down to, like, again, like I think it comes down to the whole experience, right? And I
Yeah.
think that's the shift that's happening in the industry, right? Like people
Yeah.
we now have had kind of like lean back type of video streaming experience for like 15 years at this point. and
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
and as you said, right, like we're starting to move into this more experiential world where we're taking
Yeah.
advantage of this like two-way pipe that's the internet, right? Like
Yeah.
in the
Yeah.
streaming
That's
world.
right.
So um, for me, like premium really just means like better video quality, right? And you have 4K videos, right? Maybe you're encoding in an AV1, right? Things like that.
Mhm.
And then you potentially have a big audience, right? That you
Mhm.
want to stream to, right? And
Mhm.
and those are kind of the like two things that describes like premium,
Yeah.
right? Versus
That's
if you
right.
have a long tail, maybe you have a 720p stream, and then you
Mhm.
have less viewers, right? And by the way, sometimes you have 720p streams and millions of viewers. That
Yeah, that's right.
those cases
That's
happen.
right. It's true. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
if we just focus on the high quality videos with a large audience, um, I'd
Mhm.
say I'd say like the current state of WebRTC, it's actually good enough to serve most of
Mhm.
those use cases, right? Like,
Mhm.
and especially when it comes to streaming media, like even the Super Bowl, when you're streaming online, you're streaming to a couple million viewers. You're
Yeah.
not streaming
Yeah.
to like tens of millions of viewers, right?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
people tend to like gloss over that. Like you see the Super
Yeah.
Bowl number,
Yeah.
viewership is high. I mean, like most of that is not happening over
Concurrence.
streaming, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah. That's a super key point. And I'm involved in a lot of conversations in the industry, and you know, uh, commonly that is a point that gets missed. Everybody likes
Yeah,
to reference, the Super Bowl, and it's like, well, reality is the numbers aren't quite as big as I think what people
right,
assume. Um,
right. And
but so yeah, go ahead, Eric.
so I just mentioned the other point, right? Like, so like the way that we kind of see this is, as the number of concurrent viewers grow,
Mm-hmm.
that interaction starts to become really different, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
you can probably have a pretty manageable experience when you have thousands of
Mm-hmm.
concurrent viewers happening, and
Mm-hmm.
you're in the chat, you can still kind of interact with things.
Yeah,
When
that's
you get
right.
to like the hundreds of thousands of people concurrently viewing, the chat just flies by, right?
How
It's really
yeah,
hard
how
to.
in the world do you manage that?
Right. So
Yeah.
people have built like hierarchical structures, right? Like
Mhm.
sometimes people a newer trend is AI bots being able
Yeah,
to
yeah.
interact with the audience, or being able to kind of summarize to the streamer
Mhm.
what's happening. But
Mhm.
the way that we think about it is, for interactive streaming, it's probably really good. It's probably good to have a number of concurrent streams happening at the same time with
Mm.
for people that's your most loyal fans, right? You
Yeah,
still would
yeah.
want, like, if you're a celebrity, and you have millions of followers, you probably
Mhm.
have like 100,000 of those millions of followers who really want to watch your interactive stream and are willing
Mm.
to pay for it, and are
Mhm.
willing to like engage with you like that, right? And so that's actually the perfect use case. You still want to have
Mm.
super high quality video, right? You can still
Yeah,
do,
yeah,
like, you can stream 4K videos over
yeah.
WebRTC, right? No
Yes, you
problem.
can. Yeah,
Yeah, and especially with the advent of AV1, you're
yeah,
saving 30-40% of bandwidth there,
yeah,
and that's actually really good. You transcode that
yeah,
in real time and have people be able to kind of switch renditions.
yeah,
That's a pretty solid tech stack to do
yeah,
those types of premium content interactive streaming, right?
yeah. That's
Yeah.
right.
So, and
Yeah.
the other thing that we've done is for streams that actually want to have a much higher viewership numbers, we just make the HLS stream also available at the same time. So you kind of
Mhm.
have the same video stream that's coming in. You
Mhm.
stream the WebRTC version maybe to your biggest fans, and maybe they're
Mhm.
the ones that can actually interact. right? But
Sure.
for everybody else that just want to passively consume
They
and learn, you serve the
HLS.
HLS version.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Yep. Absolutely. So that's super interesting. So you have built a infrastructure, which, by the way, not too many other people have done this. You know, generally they're a WebRTC based platform, or they're an HTTPS, you know, live streaming platform, right? Or HTTP live streaming. But you have both. You support both. So somebody could stream at a very traditional method. Um, you know, via CDN, HTTP live streaming, or WebRTC, or both. Correct?
That's right. That's right.
Very interesting. Wow. That's cool. Okay. So codec support, and you know me, I'm a codec guy, so I have to talk about encoding. You've
Yes.
mentioned AV1. What other codecs do you support, and you know, do you have any, are you seeing any you know, any emerging standards, or you know, are you guys like an early adopter, are you sort of middle of the pack, or are you like, you know, a laggard?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
where are you?
Uh, I'd say we are like from a codec perspective, we're probably like middle of the pack.
Yeah.
Now the nice thing is Livepeer is completely open source, right? So a lot of
Yeah,
times
that's
we
right.
see community contribution,
Mm,
to support new codecs, right? So for
that's
example,
right.
now the community is working on actually supporting HEVC and AV1,
Yeah.
and that in the main software, and that's all like
Mhm.
done by the open
The
source
community.
community.
That's
Yeah.
cool. Yeah,
Um,
that's
and,
great.
and, and because Livepeer's encoding infrastructure is all decentralized, right? And what that means
Yes.
is individuals and or data center operators themselves bring the hardware to
Mhm.
then plug it in, right? So people oftentimes say, I have the capability to support, you know, these codecs in terms of decoding, these
Mm,
codecs in terms of encoding, right? And
mhm.
this the marketplace just kind of takes that into account, and you can
Yeah.
set the price differently and things like that. But
Yeah. Yeah.
in terms of trends that we're seeing, I would say um, everyone is looking at AV1. Like there's no like
Mhm.
nobody that I'm talking to, they're like, yeah, we don't care about AV1, right? Like
Yeah.
they're
Yeah.
all looking at it.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of um, deployment in real world yet, but I do really
Mhm.
think that as the price is starting to come down
Yeah.
pretty dramatically, we will start to see that pretty
Yeah,
pretty soon, right?
absolutely.
Yeah. I
Yeah,
mean, I'm
that's,
even having I'm even
consistent.
having conversation with people like there are these like OTT platforms that have
Mhm.
just like a huge library of content, right? Like you need to store all the ProRes videos for your entire
Yeah.
archive, and it's
Yeah.
gigantic,
Yeah.
right? You
Yeah.
don't want to be putting
Yeah.
it into an S3 and like
Yeah.
like incurring all that cost. So
Sure.
like I know OTT platforms are evaluating like can I encode encode the ProRes video into a 20 megabit per
Mhm.
second AV1 video and save
Yeah.
like 10x the
Yeah.
cost for archive, right? And
Yeah.
for a lot of
Yeah.
platforms, that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah, for sure, for sure. Awesome. So, what about, you know, blockchain and Web3? Now, I know that you know, we've sort of moved. We went through the era where everything was going to be on the blockchain, right? And I don't even mean you know, video and live peer, but just you know, the whole world was going to live on the blockchain. Um, in terms of what people are talking about, that's not getting discussed as much. And yet the blockchain is still very, very real. There are incredible applications for it. And I know that you've got an interesting take of how the blockchain could become an alternative to even like public cloud, right? Maybe you
Yeah,
can comment on that.
yeah, for sure. So I think there's definitely a lot of spammy stuff that's in that world, right? Like no doubt
Yeah.
it's a very noisy world. But with any
Yeah.
kind of new technology wave,
Hmm.
there's a lot of that, right? But
Sure.
if you look at the area in blockchain technology that's like clearly valuable, that clearly is growing with
Hmm.
real consumer adoption or real industry adoption, right?
Hmm.
It really comes down to this fact that like um, can we build a system that that allows people to take ownership in
Mm,
in whatever
mm,
they're using on the internet, because that's
mm.
actually a huge problem that we have today, right? Like
Yes.
we're all participating in this internet economy, but
Mhm,
the way that we're participating oftentimes is as a product of the platform that we're using, and
mhm.
the platform is monetizing based on however we're interacting with that, whether it's
Yeah.
like monetizing our data or monetizing our attention or something like
Mhm,
that, right? And that's like a very old view to look at the world, right? And I think the
yeah.
blockchain technology has that promise of allowing participants to actually be paid in a transparent way, and
Mhm,
be and I think so I think that's the main thing. So if you look at how Livepeer how the network is developed, um,
mhm,
it is rewarding the infrastructure providers to the network,
mm.
but it's rewarding them via giving them ownership, right?
Yeah. Interesting.
So if you're and the ownership is represented by the Livepeer token itself, right?
Mhm,
So if you're participating in the network, you are providing good services to the network.
mhm,
Well, you earn your way into being an owner, right?
mhm,
and
mhm,
and now and now you can have governance rights. You can
mhm.
decide on you can take profits. You can sell your ownership
Yeah.
on the
Yeah.
on the open
Sure.
market, right? Like you can make that
Sure.
decision yourself. So like think
Mhm.
if I'm an Uber driver, and if I drive for 5 years, then I get to own a little piece of Uber. Well, that's
Yeah.
kind of like that. I would argue that's a much better setup for Uber the company and
Yeah.
for the Uber
That's
driver,
right.
right? So they're
That's
more
right.
incentive aligned. The driver is probably willing to work harder,
Yeah.
create better
Sure.
economic
More
outcomes.
value,
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That's interesting. Well, we I know that there's a lot happening in generative AI and generative AI video creation in particular. And you guys are really taking a lead in an industry initiative. So why don't you talk about what you're doing? I think
Mm.
you're even working alongside Adobe and some other very significant companies. So
Yes, yes. This has been an initiative that we've been involved with for about a year, but Adobe has actually been working on this for longer than we have. So
mm,
they're leading this thing called the Content Authenticity Initiative, the CAI,
mhm,
and then there's kind of a technical standards body called the C2PA, right? So those are
mhm,
kind of
mhm,
two groups, but very closely related, and the premise is that. Um, we want to create a new standard that allows the consumers to be able to see the provenance information of the media that they're consuming. And the provenance is a big
mm,
word, but what it really means is like if I'm watching a video, I want to know where the video comes from, who shot it, like
mm,
who edited it, like
mm.
and who published it, right? And all of that information is important for me to be able to tell, like to fight like misinformation on the internet, it's
Sure,
just kind of like
sure.
a new tool for us, right? So
Yeah.
that that initiative has been going on for a couple of years. Now, recently, it really came um, to become much more significant because of the rise of Gen AI.
Mm,
And now we have the ability to really easily using a diffusion model to
mhm.
either change the content of the video or generate completely new videos from scratch, right?
That's
And you've
right.
probably seen
Yeah.
OpenAI's recent announcement of Sora, and that's
Yeah.
really impressive. Like we're
It's
improving
amazing.
just
Yeah.
leaps and bounds like in a very short
Yeah.
amount of time, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
so it's not difficult to imagine in just a couple years where it's gonna be impossible to tell if the video footage is real. Like even today, when I
Yeah.
see some video on Twitter, my immediate
Yeah.
reaction is like, this
Yeah.
is generated by video by
Yeah.
AI, or is it
Yeah.
real, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that's a
Yeah.
tough position to be in for a consumer, and that's a
Yeah.
tough position to be
Exactly.
in for platforms. Like how can you
Mhm.
actually create trust, right? And
Mhm.
organizations that have a reputation to protect. If you're the BBC, how can you say like this piece of content is actually from the BBC versus if I just
Mhm.
put a BBC banner in my
Yeah.
like, in my video, and
Yeah.
like I changed my face to Barack Obama and I started like speaking,
Yeah.
right? Um,
That's
so
right.
so this technology has been like adopted for like, for creating this for this new tool, right? And
Mm.
we've been a part of this, and I actually gave a talk at the Mux last year, kind of talking about this technology, right? And so the
Mhm.
idea is that um, there's kind of a signing mechanism using crypto keys, well,
Mhm.
they're using like cryptography keys, right? Not
Mhm.
dissimilar to how SSL works on the internet today,
Mhm.
where you have
Mhm.
HTTPS, right? You have that like
Mhm.
provenance, and to prove that this domain is actually owned by the company that says it owns the domain, right? The same
Yeah.
concept. This video was created by this person, and it was put into Adobe Premiere, edited by this person, published by
Edited.
this
Yeah.
organization. You
Yeah.
can see
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, very interesting. Is there an application then to leverage going back to, blockchain? Does that is that fundamental mechanism, the certification and the signing of that, does it leverage blockchain? Could it one day? Does it even need to? Is there a
Yeah,
tie-in there?
I think we're living currently in the phase of none of that stuff is kind of defined yet, and
Mm,
in a couple years there will be a common practice that everyone kind
yeah,
of coalesce around, right? So
sure,
so
sure.
so currently, the nice thing is the C2PA standard is actually very compatible with existing like kind of authentication techniques on the
Mm,
internet. So like there's
mm,
not a lot of new technologies that are being invented. It's really just around creating tooling to make it work for video workflows and make it work for for image workflows and things like that, and getting
sure.
that integrated into the tools that people use, right?
Yeah, yeah.
But when it comes to the blockchain, I think that there's an interesting opportunity for the blockchain, which is for the certificates to be stored on the blockchain, where it's a
Mm,
public neutral place that no one can manipulate, right? Like, and
mhm,
the nice thing, the nice kind of benefit for blockchain is once you write to the blockchain, you can't change that anymore. You can't tamper with
mm,
it. There's clear cryptographic proof on who put the data there, right? And
mhm.
so you can use that as a source to create these type of
That's right.
attestation data or authenticity data,
Yeah.
and one could argue that by putting that on the blockchain, it creates more credible neutrality
Mhm.
than by just putting it into someone's database.
Yeah, exactly. That's awesome. Well, Eric, always good talking with you. And, this was an incredible conversation. And congratulations on 8 years building, Livepeer, and just where you have, where you've grown it to. By the way, how much traffic are you able to disclose some numbers as to, how many minutes a week, a month that you're encoding, transcoding on the platform?
Yeah. So currently, I think there's about 3 million minutes of video per month, per
Mm,
week that's being
mm.
encoded,
Per
and
week.
then
Wow.
per week, yeah,
Yeah.
and about like 3 million minutes. Last month we streamed over 3 million hours of video
Wow.
on the
Wow.
platform. So
Wow. Incredible.
definitely more scale than before,
Yeah.
but we're just
Yeah.
getting started. I think,
You're just getting
and,
started. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Excellent. Excellent. Well, good. Well, thank you everyone who joined live. Really appreciate you being here. And the videos, of course, are available for replay. So, Eric, until next time, I guess I'll see you in a couple weeks at NAB, right?
Yes, for sure.
Yeah.
I'll see you there in
Cool.
person.
Cool. It's awesome. All right. Thanks for joining the Voices of Video.
Thank you for having me.